All rise. Court is now in session. Man, I have been waiting to say that. The plaintiff is Candace Owens. The defendant is Kamala Harris. The case before the judge is that she says she's black, and I say she is not. And so it is an honor for me to host Judge Joe Brown, who has been making the rounds because he vaguely remembers a conversation, not vaguely, he very much remembers a conversation that he had with her daddy. And the things that Kamala is saying today don't really match what Kamala's father, Donald Harris, told Judge Joe Brown. Welcome to Candace.
Well, the judge is in the house, dear. So here I am. Anyway, I came right down the road from Memphis, not too far.
So you have been all over the news. Actually, right now, you probably are not on Twitter, but there's a clip of you that's gone absolutely viral.
Well, I am on Twitter, X.
Oh, yeah, you're on X. Okay, good.
Yeah, you can get me at Judge Joe Brown TV.
Okay, so did you know that you were going viral this morning?
No, I didn't, but it wouldn't be the first time. And then they tried to knock that down. Kwame Brown and I did a thing 2 or 3 years back, and we got up to 9.8 million views, which is definitely viral. But then we started knowing that the views started dropping, and then if you look at it now, it's like 800,000. I guess they didn't want anybody to look at 9.8 million. You want to see what's going on. Well, that's not anything compared to what Trump and Musk get on X.
Yeah, well, the numbers that you're pulling right now, I would say, are equivalent to Trump and Musk, particularly a clip of you that's on stage. So I'm going to tell you what I saw, and I've actually played clips of you on my show as well. The thing that I love about judges is you guys you tend to have a really good memory and a great record with the truth. And I can say, after speaking with you leading up to this, you don't forget a thing. You do not.
Sometimes you want to forget some things. You say, oh, no, did I do that back when? But then sometimes you don't.
Yeah, and you clearly remember a lot, and you were running the exact same circles as Kamala Harris. You're out in California. So can you explain to us how you met her father, just how that came about?
What was going on is this is a convoluted story. Magic Johnson's mother, a fine woman, and one of her buddies, who was the oldest sister of a personal friend of mine, would always involve me in these projects with the islands, right? So they got me down there, and I was supposed to participate in the youth program in Jamaica. So I was the guest of the Prime Minister and the Governor General.
And who was that at the time?
Well, let's not get into that because there's some complications with that. And my ex and I, we were attendees at this dinner, so we got introduced to everybody's favorite Hindu professor. And he was sitting next to my ex-wife, or wife at the time, for a while. So we all had this back and forth questioning thing at the table. So it was quite interesting. And I recalled running to him back in the 60s. He and his wife were grad students up in the Bay Area, and I was an undergrad at UCLA. So there was a back and forth between Los Angeles, man, where you go crazy and then go to the asylum up in the Bay Area. So it was interesting what was going on back then.
So how was his demeanor when you guys are at this dinner and you're in Jamaica? What do you think about him?
He's reserved.
Reserved. Okay.
Dignified, laid back.
Mm-hmm. But still involved and my understanding is that he's been involved in politics actually for a long time, has had an interest in politics his entire life, I would say.
Yes, quite. I'd call him a Marxist.
A Marxist. And that is exactly what I've heard from a family member of his, that he, from the time he was very young, was always involved in Marxist meetings and Marxist groups, kind of a dyed-in-the-wool commie. I don't think that's something that he's ashamed of, by the way. I think he wrote about in the Jamaican Global Online how he was sort of raised up on the politics via who he purports to be his grandmother, Christiana Brown. But it's interesting that you said you were introduced to a Hindu professor.
Mm-hmm.
What made you think that he was Hindu?
That's the introduction.
That was the introduction. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And your wife?
What is she?
No, did she get to talk to him about that?
She talked to him, and it was interesting because at that time there was no reason to put him with anybody special until you started putting all of it together. He was a Marxist, and when he was up in the Bay Area, a lot of things were going on up there. That was Liberty Park up there, where in 1964, a lot of what was going on that led to the rousing unrest of the 60s and the public demonstrations was happening. My in-laws were from up there, and I didn't know them then because I think my ex-wife was born the same year that Kamala was born. So, this was before all of that, but this was the locus of a lot of things going on. The Black Panther Party was up there, developed. So it was pretty radical in Berkeley, Oakland, Richmond, and this is where the action was. UCLA was in Los Angeles, that was a bit more civilized, really wild up there in the Bay Area. So he gravitated to that. That's the way I would analyze it. So there was a Marxist thing up there. Also, this was during the rise of Jim Jones, which is another thing. You know Jim Jones, the Kool-Aid and the picnic.
Mm-hmm.
Kamala's sponsor, Willie Brown, Maxine Waters, and some other people Nancy Pelosi were staunch supporters of Jim Jones. Interesting, yes, you need to look into that. You'll find some very interesting things like, hey, this was your mentor, and he was a supporter of this. So it was a center for a lot of radicalism at the time.
So it's so funny how life happens this year, and I don't even know what the reason was. Actually, I do. A friend of mine sent me a book, and the book was called Chaos, and she said, "You will love this for your birthday." I read, and I opened the book, and I couldn't put it down. It was the subtitle of the book is something along the lines of Charles Manson, MK Ultra in the 1960s. Okay, and essentially it's this reporter who was just supposed to write a magazine article on like the 30th anniversary of the Manson murders, and he had no horse in the race. Starts calling around, making some calls. He was very well known, and everyone was scared to talk to him. Long story short, he ends up finding that the CIA was intimately involved, and now this is public knowledge. You can look this up on Wikipedia, that Charles Manson was a Fed, that the CIA was involved, was there the night of the Manson murders. It takes him 30 years. He ended up getting fired from the magazine. He ends up writing this book. He went completely broke because he had to do so many FOIA requests because he was going, what is happening? What really actually happened on this night? And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because elements of this book, as he goes through understanding that the feds were involved with a lot of this radicalism that people thought was organic, whether we're talking about the hippies movement, LSD, things that were happening that to the public seemed to be sort of these natural movements, actually entailed operations from the Fed, COINTELPRO, MK Ultra. You're talking about the Black Panthers. Some students broke into the FBI office at that time and were able to get documents which showed that the feds were tracking a bunch of people. Obviously, we know that with Martin Luther King. And this journalist, who was from San Francisco and attended Berkeley, recently wrote a piece saying that he knew that Kamala's mother was involved with the feds and the program MK Ultra. And when I read this, it seemed so far out. And then as I was learning from Donald's family that he was a dyed-in-the-wool communist, and I'm learning that he was extremely secretive, and I'm kind of thinking, why was Kamala's mom, who was like a top-rated scientist?
Maybe that's why they didn't seem to be able to stand each other after a while. There seems to have been some great animosity between mom and dad when they broke up. You might be hitting on the source of the problem. Mm-hmm. That was very widespread. People don't understand what that was like back in the 60s to be active. We would have meetings gatherings, and 3 weeks later, the FBI is hauling you in and quoting to you what you said, and you'd say, "Yeah, freedom of speech, First Amendment. You got that? No, I'm not going to tell you this because you'll get me for making a knowingly false statement. Screw you. I'll take the fifth on that, or get me back." And they'd always manage to get you so they could take your phone book and get the numbers out of it. So you took to no longer carrying your black book with you because no telling when the FBI is going to pick you up. And by the way, I was the last judge on that James Earl Ray case, and I know what the FBI did. That quick summation to set the background. Ray had absolutely nothing to do with King dying. The FBI ordered that hit. They recruited a two-man sniper team, not one, from Quantico Marine Sniper School, which was right across the tarmac from the FBI school. They supplied the weapon, which is an XM21, which is a modified M14. I do have in various places around the country the serial numbers for the 5 of them they got on an invoice late December 1967, and 5,000 rounds of the ammunition that are identical in aspects to what they pulled out of King's body. The next thing is the Justice Department ordered them to return the 5 rifles. April 68, that's the month King was assassinated, and they claim they lost one. That's the murder weapon. And they have the serial numbers for the 4 they did return, so they only made 63 of them at the time. So the FBI is suspect. This COINTELPRO developed later, but they had the SIS unit. And if anybody wants to read about that, get the Glass House tapes written by Louis Tackwood. Tackwood scared the hell out of me and a lot of other people. We knew him as supposedly somebody who had been a medic in the NOM, and he came back and he was treating people who got injured in the 60s. It was chaotic in those days. And I remember I was in law school and I went to watch this murder trial downtown LA, and they brought it in. I said, "That's Tackwood." Not only was he not a snitch, they introduced him as Lieutenant Louis Tackwood, Vice Commander of the SIS unit for LAPD. Everybody was going, "Oh man, this dude knows everything," but he didn't tell on everybody. But this was real. And I know 15, 16 people that I was acquainted with that got shot to death who were active in these movement situations.
This has been a strange election. The Dems have made it apparent that they are zealous for the blood of babies. Kamala Harris is the first vice presidential candidate to ever visit an abortion facility. As First Things reported, Tim Walz supports the right to infanticide. Did you hear me? Infanticide is the taking of a baby's life after birth. It is, like I said, insane. The media has dubbed this the abortion election. We must take a stand against this evil. When you join forces with Preborn, the largest pro-life organization in the nation, you are protecting the greatest victims in our society, babies in their mother's womb. Preborn's network of clinics are positioned in the highest abortion areas in the nation, and they have rescued over 300,000 babies. When a woman considering abortion searches to end her baby's life, Preborn is there. Preborn gives these women in need a free ultrasound. The power of hearing the baby's heartbeat on an ultrasound combined with God's love doubles a baby's chance at life. One ultrasound costs just $28, and up to 5 ultrasounds are $140, and they can save lives. Any gift will help their cause, and all gifts are tax deductible. To donate securely, you just dial pound 250 and say the keyword baby. That's pound 250 baby. Or you can go to preborn.com/Candace. Again, that's preborn.com/Candace. Why did the so obviously, by the way, you've said something very big in terms of a lot of people who are young and are not well read up on history, real history. What they learn in the classroom is essentially a fairy tale. I've known that the FBI killed MLK. Most people don't understand the FBI killed MLK. But why? They were tapping him, they were threatening him, they were, everything was crazy. And we could talk about JFK too. But what was their reason for being so obsessed with the Black Panthers? With they murdered many of the Panthers as well. They murdered Martin Luther King Jr. And it's also very scary that they can do these things and then print out textbooks that say, "Oh no, this random guy did it." You know, like, so what was their reason? What was their obsession with wanting to infiltrate these movements?
They were concerned about what was going on in the Nam. There's a big hookup with everybody that we've been talking about, also Obama's people, Barry Soetoro's people, and the Nam. The idea, for instance, the memoranda we got a hold of with the King assassination thing, they were not worried about him starting civil rights back up. That was dead. Civil rights was dead and gone by the mid-1960s. It had been replaced by militancy, and the FBI memoranda, actually they were discussing whether he'd be more dangerous as a dead martyr or is alive somebody to galvanize the anti-war movement and revitalize labor. Those were the two things they were concerned about. I recruited John Huggins, Bunchy Carter, Geronimo Pratt, Elaine Brown, Nat Clark, and a few other people who were in the Panthers to UCLA back in the 60s. And it was the same thing with them. What were they going to do about getting people wrapped up in this militancy of saying we're not going to be down on our knees while somebody beats us across the head anymore and somebody else feels guilty? We're going to do something about it. And I've seen the stories that came out of the assassination of John and Bunchy at UCLA. Hell, I was there. They ran right past me when not John, but his assassins are running right past me. They had shot John in the back twice, and he died of that, but not before he set up and fired 6 shots at him, the guy that shot him, and 3 others running down the hallway. Elaine Brown and I were getting ready to go up some stairs when this went on. So it's interesting, the LAPD detectives that were investigating the homicides, they wound up calling some of us and say, could you meet us at, of all places, Denny's? Well, why not at the police precinct? Because it's not safe. Somebody on our side is not working on our side. They're working with something else. And we have cause to be fearful of our lives, meaning they, the detectives. So we would have these meetings in some weird places, and we'd discuss stuff, and they'd say, you know, we're trying to make a bust, but only people that know are in our department. And when we get there, somebody's already told, and
yeah, so
that was
a huge piece of that chaos book, was that it made me understand that the feds have people at the LAPD office that do the cleanups, that are watching everybody to see what they're investigating, and also at the medical examiner's office, the coroner's office, like making sure that the reports say what they want them to say, so that they can present their case. I mean, he showed from top to bottom, like judges, lawyers, the LAPD. I would never live in LA after reading this book, because you realize it's just an entire operation. They can make you disappear, they'll kill you, and you'll be none the better. And that almost directly ties in with what we're learning about the Diddy case, which is like, okay, that he knew who to call at the LAPD to come over and to make something disappear if things got out of hand, or if somebody was shot or somebody got hurt. And so this has been going on, and I think this discussion is really important since the 60s. I've been really working hard for people to wake up about who your government is. But I'm fascinated that you say that you think it was about the war, because that really was my takeaway from that book, Chaos, was they needed the hippie generation to end, and having this big fake staged Hollywood murder that the CIA was actually involved in, and Charles Manson was a Fed, was a way to traumatize with propaganda, was to traumatize the public, the hippie communes, everyone's love, rock and roll, let's not go to war. And he basically said overnight, because of these horrific murders, people started locking their doors, they were afraid of hippies, and the music died that day. Nobody wanted anything with like peace, love, rock and roll, and LSD, because they were just all told that following this case. So we're talking about a psychological operation that was enacted on the public to create a mass psychosis. And you're virtually saying the exact same thing. What was their worry? Well, people didn't want to go to war, and they had war on the mind, and they wanted to get to war, and they couldn't have anybody who was militantly against it or peacefully against it like the hippies were.
There's another cook up too. We were talking about that rainbow thing. it's interesting how they got started. In the late mid 60s, they're going around all over the country talking about this. And it was a coalition of those who hated that they weren't men. Those were the feminists. The ones that hated men, some of the lesbians. The ones that hated that they weren't normal men, that were some of the gays. The ones that hated that they weren't strong men, the soy boys, so to speak. And then the big chunk was this other, hey man, war is a man thing, man. You know, it's all about love, man. We got to have love power, man, flower power. Men are about war. You have to change the way men are raised from boys so they're more into expressing themselves. So you got this thing there that had the overwhelming ballast. And that is the impetus for what led us to where we are now. And this was an important thing. It was an anti-man thing that developed because of this perception that men are responsible for war. Forget about the fact that we've got a large component of the military now and some striving to be in combat arms that are female, but it was perceived to be a man thing, so no war toys, no cap guns, no water pistols. Boys and girls had unisex child clothing, child rearing. Boys are supposed to be able to emote, to cry, to shout, to let it all hang out instead of being so uptight and under self-control. And the worst thing you want is the apex predator on the planet Earth to be out of control, which is exactly what they were setting up. And this thing came together, and it juxtaposed itself in a situation where Hollywood's movie studios were going bankrupt in the face of color television. A color TV up until the mid 60s, the screen looked just like this table. It was round and no bigger than that. And then they got square when the technology improved. So people were staying at home watching their color TVs. 1967, if you were an adult, you'd pay 50 cents to get in a movie, and you got two movies, and they changed every Thursday and Sunday, no matter how well they did. You got 3 cartoons and a couple of sub-features. Walk in anytime you wanted, stay as long as you wanted. So then somebody came up with the bright idea, let's just have one movie at a time, keep it playing as long as people will come. Let's go get the black markets. The minority markets, they want to see themselves. That's a massive amount of money out there. Let's start using the opportunity to spread dysfunction through glorification of it. We don't want Sidney Poitier playing a part where he's trying to be this and that. Let's get Fred the Hammer Williams to play a drug dealer like Black Caesar, so you glorify being a pimp, a hoe, and we'll come back to that in a bit. A gangster, a drug dealer, a murderer, a thief, and you got Foxy Brown with Pam Grier, and there was this whole thing where they'd have the obligatory naked, nude scenes in the whole thing. And the plot would be somebody got killed by somebody's drug dealers, and then so they wanted the revenge, and then they wanted to become drug dealers, and then you got Superfly and all of that nonsense, and you got glorification of dysfunction. And the theory that I heard was that young black men are supposed to be the epitome of masculinity, so let's effeminize them, and then you can effeminize the whole public because the young white guys will try to copy the young black guys, and if you effeminize the young black guys, you get everybody in this mess. And then that led to what they did with the rap genre, which has been stagnant for 45 years. I mean, it's gotten more profane, but it hasn't changed.
But also, it's exceedingly homosexual. I mean, everyone's gay.
Yes, it is. And the other thing is, it's not very masculine because some of the malinformed feminists say it's this sexual fantasy. That's not what you're looking at when you're looking at the half-naked bimbos bouncing on stage behind the rap artist in the gangster hip-hop rap video. That's not his girlfriend. That's his mama, grandmama, and their friend girls and their favorite aunts. So they ideate on feminist stuff like who's going to take care of me, and I got women I live of. I'm not a producer, I'm not a protector, and you got this whole downhill spiral, which is leading us to where we are right now, where there's no duty, honor, accountability, responsibility, bravery, courage. There's no guilt, no shame to keep you self-corrected and self-focused. You're not interested in making where you live a better, safer, more secure place filled with economic prosperity, sense of purpose, morality, and ethics, and you're not dedicating yourself to being a man or a woman of public peace, dignity, and order. You just let it all go to hell, and you try to destroy all human character building things because anything counts. Because if you have character, and let's say you're a man, that means if you happen to be on the Titanic and it goes down, you say, ma'am, you and your child may have my seat on a lifeboat. I'll drown in the freezing waters. What happens is you say, I've got on a dress too, so get out of the way. That's my seat. You know,
Yeah.
no, take him and throw him over there and chum the sharks with him, you know.
Yeah, I mean, you can definitely see that they've kind of just continued, or they moved it on. I mean, it's a Fed operation, and then they realized the power of media, the power of Hollywood, the power of propaganda through the TV screen. And it's interesting to see that despite overwhelming evidence that that's what's happening in terms of the music, and I know I'm on the right track. As soon as you say like gangster rap is a Fed operation, as soon as you start talking about the Fed's involvement in Hollywood, the media goes crazy. The media has always been an extension of the Feds. They literally paid them Operation Mockingbird after they shot JFK. They had them on payroll to, control the masses and what they think. And yet you have people who are still so controlled. And I can't think of a better example of that than looking at the fawning over Barack Obama and the fawning over Kamala Harris and their belief that magically if a journalist writes that they're black and she creates this trove of fake photos of aunts and uncles and a photoshopped photo of her and her grandma Beryl, that's not her grandma.
She came back from the grave.
Yeah, exactly. Then suddenly
Reincarnation.
people just believe it. They just go, oh, well, if the media is telling me that this obviously Hindu woman is black, then I better just accept that she's going to be the first black president. And it's just incredible that people can't stop and process that the media is not telling you the truth.
That's 50 years of glorification of dysfunction. Don't think, just accept. And it's a propaganda thing that they've been laying out there for a long time. And back in the 60s, if you were at the right college campus, you could hear them planning it. Like join both political parties to create chaos, so that's a smoke screen you can operate behind. Okay, propagandize the public. Take the black experience. You want to be fair to the black folk in the country, so you extend that fairness to other things, and you can use it as a cover. We can get into that later if you want to, but it's a farce, and it's a bill of goods that's being sold on the public. Now, when you get into this whole thing and you get back to the FBI, you have to understand that the FBI is not a holy organization.
It's a gang.
How it came into existence. They wanted to get Jack Johnson. Jack Johnson was the first black world heavyweight champion. Nobody could beat him. And back then, they'd have bouts 25, 30, 40 rounds worth till nobody was standing and nobody could beat him. And Jack Johnson had a white wife. So people objected to him traveling around with his white wife and her entourage, and they just thought this was just horrible. So they created the FBI, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, to go get something that became the Mann Act, which you can see them using on Diddy, and they used it on R. Kelly. I'm not defending either one of them or persecuting them either or prosecuting, but that's what they were using. So what happens is Jack Johnson and his wife were going across
State line.
Georgia to go to a seaport to go to France, and they had gotten 15 minutes in when the FBI, who were not armed in those days, were accompanied by U.S. Marshals. They rushed the train and they arrested him, they prosecuted him, convicted him. He escaped. He went to France. His mother wanted to see him, and he tried to sneak back in. He got caught, served his time, actually more for the escape than for the offense, wound up dying in a car wreck in 1946. Obama wouldn't pardon him, but Trump did posthumously. And for a lot of older black folk, Jack Johnson was Muhammad Ali, Joe Louis in prototype. But that's how Hoover got started. He was assigned to the brothels in New York, and he was masquerading as one of those little special taste functions on the third floor. He was a cute little colored boy at the time. And by the way, Smithsonian Institution and the History Channel, they have gotten into him being black and passing. And J. Edgar Hoover. If you look, I'll show you some pictures.
Never heard this.
Oh, I'll show you some pictures, and if you look at him, you're looking at somebody that looks more black than Kamala does. So anyway,